Hello, everybody. Justin Stivers. Thank you guys for watching, listening to another episode of the Stivers Show. Very excited. My guest today, attorney Josh Nelson with Nelson Elder Care Law up in Georgia. Josh, what's going on, man?
Just glad to be here, Justin. Appreciate you having me on. It's something we've known you for a while. Appreciated working with you. Always had really happy clients whenever we send them down to you. And so glad for letting me jump on here and share a little bit about what we do. Just talk back and forth on your podcast here.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. They're not all happy. Most of them are happy, but
The angry ones haven't told me yet. So
no, man, I appreciate it. I was telling you before, we've worked together. You referred us, and always speak highly of you, and hopefully we'll be able to start sending you more stuff up towards Georgia. But it seems like more people are retiring to Florida than they are to Georgia. So I don't.
they tend to go the other direction, right? Not a whole lot of people coming from Florida back to Georgia, but there's a lot of people from Georgia wanting to go down there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. After this COVID thing, we might see an exodus from South Florida, but I'm not sure, man. But well, awesome, brother. I appreciate you being on here, and I always like to turn it over to you, and so I'll let you maybe start. Who are you, and what do you guys do up there at Nelson Elder Care Law?
Yeah, so I'm Josh Nelson from Nelson Elder Care Law. Where we practice at is up on the northern side of Atlanta, northwestern side of Atlanta. We really help people protect their assets from future medical costs, help them get extra government benefits. Our average client age is over 70, and it's because we really help people in the later stages of life. And so we aren't the kind of firm that helps you whenever you're in your 30s and you're trying to figure out who's going to be the guardian of your minor children. We generally only help people over age 55 that are really thinking about, if I get a diagnosis of Parkinson's, if I get some kind of cancer, if I get something really crazy that's going to cost a lot in medical, how do I protect my house? How do I protect my spouse? How do I protect the legacy that I built up for my kids to make sure that it just doesn't all go to medical costs or hospital bills? Even with great insurance, there's still a lot of costs whenever we get sick. And a lot of people don't realize that your health insurance really tries to get you better. But if the doctors say that you're not going to get better, you're now disabled, you have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, just mobility issues. A lot of what we see is even like neuropathy, which is a relatively small issue. It's where like your feet don't raise back up, but it makes it so you can't drive. It makes it so you can't walk. It's these little things that happen to you in life that the doctors can't fix. And so then if you need somebody to come into your house, or you need to go to an independent living or an assisted living or even a nursing home, how do you pay $9,000 a month for that level of care? There's programs out there that help people, and by planning ahead, you can qualify for them even without being broke. That's what we do.
So just maybe briefly, what would define when you say elder care attorney or elder law attorney? What does that mean?
It's a horrible name. I'll go ahead and let everybody know that it's a big misnomer. I have 6 clients that are over 100, and 4 of them still tell me they aren't old. One guy has more hair than me and always makes fun of it. He's like, but we just never feel old. We never feel elder. But it's just the type of law that I practice. What it is it's different than estate planning. Estate planning is really helping you define where your stuff goes whenever you die. And elder law is more the practice of making sure you have a best quality of life that you can while you're alive. So it does include some of the same tools like powers of attorney, advanced directives for healthcare. We do wills, we do trusts. We just have a lot of tools in the toolbox that we can use, but we also want to make sure that it's really effective during your lifetime. So like a lot of people come in with like a power of attorney that's just a couple pages long, but then whenever they try and go use it at an IRA or a brokerage account or even certain banks or to do a closing on a house, they find out that it's really not worth the paper it's written on because nobody's going to accept it. So like whenever you do an elder law power of attorney, we have to plan for the fact that you might not be able to leave your house. You might not be able to leave the hospital. So whenever we give a power of attorney out, it has the authority to literally do anything that the grantor can do. And so if it's selling the house, if it's renting the house, if it's accessing qualified funds like IRAs, 401ks, dealing with pensions, that's a lot different document compared to like a statutory power of attorney that a lot of people have. Like our power of attorney is over 25 pages long because it has to express those things.
I feel like there's a story, but is there a reason why you got into this type of law?
It actually is. I started with tax law. Tax law was one of the things that I wanted to do ever since I was a little kid.
As
Um,
most young boys do.
it was the money. I liked Ferraris whenever I was little, and tax lawyers get paid a lot of money. So a lot of people don't realize that in order to fight the IRS, your issue or your matter in controversy really needs to be over $500,000 because otherwise the fees just don't even make sense. And so I did my master's in tax as well as my JD all at the same time. Came out, worked for that side of things, and loved it, but it was a lot of travel. And so because tax court actually moves around, you have to go where they are. And so it's not like you just get to sit in Miami or Atlanta or Charleston or St. Louis. You have to go to all these different places. And that's really fun whenever you're in your 20s. As you start getting a little bit older, you're like, maybe I don't want to be on the road 280 days a year. And my mom was practicing elder law, and she had a couple people come in that had gotten some really, really bad advice on what's called qualified funds, IRA money. At the time, in order to qualify, the VA required you to either spend it down or do some crazy annuity type stuff with it. And another lawyer had told a couple families, well, just spend it, pay the taxes now, because you're going to pay them anyway. And my mom was like, that just doesn't seem right, but they have it in writing from this other attorney. Can you take a look at it? And so I sit down with the family and I'm going through it with them. And they were about to lose about 35% of their retirement, all because somebody gave them really malpractice level advice, just because they didn't know how the taxes part worked. And come to find out, whenever I was talking with the guy, he was a World War II pilot, and he flew what's called a P-51, which was a pursuit plane that went and protected the bombers whenever they were going into the danger zones. And there's only about 17,000 of these guys out there. And his son, who was sitting at the table with us, had never heard that story. And that blew my mind. Like, I'm over here just nerding out because this is like meeting Chet Yeager, like, to me. Like, it's literally like I'm just blown away by this guy's story. And his son never heard it because a lot of these guys came back from World War II, and by the time their kids were old enough to have that conversation, they wanted to push it out of their mind. I mean, that was whenever you're hitting like Vietnam era, and nobody's thinking real great of our soldiers, and so the stories just didn't get told. And so my mom started trying to say, well, why don't you come help me with some of these things? And I was like, nah, I love what I'm doing. Eventually took a significant pay cut, came and joined her, but it was because I really liked working for the people. The VA has amazing programs, but the access to them is ridiculous. So right now, like with the COVID outbreak, they have over 205,000 backlogged claims. And the way they define backlog is claims that are over 125 days past due. And so it's not just that they have over 200,000 claims, is that they have 200,000 claims that are 4 months behind where they should be. And a lot of the VA benefits have this rule where if you die while your application's pending, you don't get the benefits. And so people just need somebody in their corner. They need somebody to help them fight this. And ethically and legally, you can't charge people to help with this. So there's not a whole lot of people out there that are doing it for free. And so what we do is we come in and we create the plan to help people protect their assets from the VA, from the medical costs, make sure they qualify for Medicaid, where we aren't blowing any of these benefit programs up. And it's some of the most rewarding work that I can imagine. Literally, people walk in with just the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they walk out with sighs of relief. We always laugh that, during these times, the hardest part is, they can't hug us, where prior to COVID, I mean, we were just getting hugs and people just share their most intimate moments to you. And it's just really, really rewarding work.
That's awesome. I'm gonna dig into that in a second. I do want to ask, though, how's it working with mom? If
Well
she's sitting next to
structured.
you,
Well structured. Whenever I was younger, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. And so um, I've had uncles that have worked with family. I worked for my grandparents whenever I was younger. And eventually it all comes to a head. And so whenever I came to work with mom, one of the biggest things is just making sure that all the expectations were in writing. Even whenever you're dealing with your family, especially your mom, and you're doing business, you got to make sure it's in writing so that everybody's clear on it. And as long as we went into it knowing what the expectations were, what everybody's terms are, it's been really, really great. She has a lot of areas that she excels in. I have a lot of areas that I excel in, but the two of us together really make a great team.
That's awesome. I love the writing it down part. I told you before we got on, my dad's a financial advisor, and we've toyed with working together, but and sort of like my wife, she's not an attorney, but we've toyed with having her come work at the office. But even just in conversation, it turns into a fight. So it's kind of like a good sign that we should not work together.
We shouldn't do it. The other thing is that we have a rule where we don't talk about work outside of work. And so if we're at family dinner or we're going out for dinner or we're going to do something fun with the family, that's not work time. That's not, let's bring up what's going on in the office. And that's really important so that you have that kind of split, especially if it is somebody like your spouse or your parent. You want to make sure that you aren't carrying the stresses of what's going on at the office back home with you. Um, but yeah, we knew just because of what we've had in the family before that it had to be well written out, well documented. And especially with attorneys, you always hear about like even the estate planners that don't have their own will done or they don't have their own plan set up. And it's just too often that it's easier to tell other people to do things with business succession than it is to do it yourself. And so we made a real goal of right from the beginning, just make sure everything's written down, make sure everybody's in agreement on things. Makes things super simple. We haven't had an issue yet. We had our 6-year anniversary on September 1st of this year. And we've grown from really a staff of 3 people to over 21. So, I mean, it's been going great.
That's awesome. And I'm curious. I would think because this is such a sensitive, family-oriented type of work that you do, I would think that your clients kind of like that it's a family firm that they're working with.
I think they do. And I think one of the things that we really focus on, even as we've grown, is making sure that we never lose that family feel. And so even whenever we grow, we add extra capabilities. We can do things that we couldn't do years ago just because we have the staff to be able to help. So like one of the big things for us is whenever we create a trust for somebody, we send a member of my team that's a funding manager to the bank with them to make sure that the accounts are set up the way they're supposed to be.
That's awesome.
We fill out all the forms with the financial advisors to make sure the trust gets funded the way it's supposed to be. Those are things that you just can't do whenever it's just you and one other person. You got to have a team to be able to accomplish that stuff. And it really provides a lot of value for the clients. But we also want those clients to feel like they can pick up the phone and get to me or Cindy, and that they really have somebody on the team that they can access to make sure that we don't lose that kind of family or small firm feel, even as we grow.
That's great. I love that. I want to ask, so how does a person know that they even need to see you, and when would they know? Because I feel like a lot of times, most people don't even know. Maybe I don't even know.
I get
When does
asked
someone?
this question all the time, especially
Yeah,
because elder law is such a misnomer. Nobody's elder, so nobody knows when to come speak with me. The funny answer is 5 years and a day before you get sick. If you come to me 5 years and a day before you get sick, I can protect 100% of your assets. The problem is nobody's got a crystal ball. And so I don't know if it's 5 years. I don't know if it's 5 days. We've had people that we've worked with create great plans. They came in as pre-planning clients, and then they just randomly have a stroke 6 months later. It's okay if that happens. From the legal standpoint, we got the plan in place, we have the legal authority, we can still protect things. But most of the people need to plan 5 years in advance if they want 100% protection. Some people, especially if you're a married couple and your spouse is sick or going into the nursing home today, we can still have a good chance at protecting at a minimum 50%, but sometimes 100%. It just depends on how much money you really have, how it's held, things like that. One of the big problems is it's so nuanced that whatever you read on Google or whatever you hear is kind of somebody else's situation just doesn't apply to the individual families. Whenever we start talking about protected assets from long-term care costs, you got to sit down and look at what assets do the family hold? Is there a house? How's the house titled? Are they a veteran? Do they have long-term care insurance? Do they have good health insurance? It's really a nuanced kind of thing. This isn't like what people feel with estate planning, where it's just an attorney filling out worksheets that they plop your name into. It's a real plan. And so if you feel in your gut that you're not covered and you want that peace of mind, come talk to us. If you have somebody that's going into an independent living, needing caregivers at home, needing to go to an assisted living or nursing home, that's the time when you need to do it before it's considered crisis. If you wait too long after that, it's going to be a crisis case, which we can do. But remember that in a crisis, you just don't get quite as much of the savings of value.
So what are some of the, one or two of the most common mistakes you see people making out there, other than not coming to you soon enough?
Well, I think I probably see one of the ones that you see a lot, which is people doing their whole estate plan piecemeal and following advice of people like their banker. And so a lot of times I get families where the daughter's the caregiver. She's been helping out with mom and dad paying bills. And so they went to the bank. The banker told them, just put her on the account. And they didn't really realize the ramifications of that. And so a lot of the government benefits penalize you for what are called gifts. And by adding your kid to the account, that's a gift. Because even if they don't take the money out because they could, that counts as a gift. You see that on your side because if somebody else is on that account, it just goes to them. It doesn't go through their will. And that's really, really scary for a lot of families. A lot of people I work with have large sums of money in money markets or CDs or checking and savings accounts. And if it just goes to one child, they expect that kid to do the right thing, quote unquote, and give it
They never do. They never do.
But it's not even that they don't want to. Sometimes there's tax consequences to doing it. So remember, if it's more than $15,000, they have to fill out gift tax returns. Maybe they have creditors of their own. Maybe just going through the care continuum has caused it so that they don't get along with their siblings anymore. One of the biggest things that we see is the caregiver child, the kid that lives local, that's taken off from their career, that's going to help mom and dad. Whenever they get to the point that they need some money or they can't do it any longer, the relationship with their siblings gets stressed unless there's a plan in place, because the siblings don't want to be spending $4,000 a month on care whenever Justin just lives down the road. And they don't realize that means Justin can't come to work if he's got to be with mom all through the night. And that causes some ill will. So then all of a sudden, Justin's sitting there with $200,000 in a checking account that's legally his. Does he give it back? I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, that's definitely in my world. I see that, and it's certainly not, I'm sure that's not mom and dad's intention. It was just bad advice or a mistake they made.
And the other one is just really not thinking things all the way through. And so, especially thinking things like, oh, it will just work out, not really sitting down and having the hard conversations in advance. Stuff just doesn't work out. It's stressful for people. It makes it so that there's an extra stress burden on the caregivers. It makes it so that you have to go through like a guardianship conservatorship because nobody has power of attorney. In our state, a guardianship conservatorship is easily $10,000 to $15,000 to get one, where you could have had a free or a couple $100 document that made it so that you didn't have to go through that process if we would have just talked about it in advance. And that's pretty scary to think about. The other thing is not preparing your kids if you're going to be broke. So if we know that you're going to need some help from your kids, let's have that conversation early. And it doesn't mean that we need to freak them out or anything like that. But like I've seen people with long-term care insurance let it lapse just because they had a premium increase. And if you're on a fixed budget, your fixed budget doesn't increase. Well, if we would have sat down and said to the kids, hey, can you throw in an extra $100 a month now versus having to pay $4,000 a month later? Most of the kids would dig deep and figure out how we do that. But because we're embarrassed or scared to have those conversations, sometimes they don't happen. And really lacking communication is probably the biggest thing, is how do we make sure everybody's on the same page? We can still keep privacy as far as what really have, as long as we have a plan that it's going to work. But if we know we're running out of money, let's make sure that everybody involved knows that, so that it's not impacting your kids where they have to come in later and do something they weren't prepared for.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. And so I know we're coming up on our time here. So maybe to kind of close with that thought is, we were talking a little bit before, and I think a lot of attorneys feel this way, is we almost feel like counselors in the
Yeah.
true sense of the word, being a counselor, a therapist, or relationship manager, we wear a bunch of different hats. How do what would you kind of suggest, or how do you kind of coach your clients to have those uncomfortable conversations? Because what we're talking about is not exciting stuff. We're talking about,
Yeah.
the inevitable passing away and all that stuff. So how can someone listening or watching that maybe is in that position, or wants to speak with their parents, because that's a tough conversation to bring up with your parents as
Absolutely.
well. Do you talk with your clients about that, or?
We do. We really take the approach, and it's kind of a foundation of our business, that we have to be there for you, and we have to have those tough conversations, and we're going to help you have those tough conversations with your family, because if we have the conversations now and we do them in the right way, they aren't as tough. And so if we start talking about it, even if it's uncomfortable, a lot of the calls we get are people with like cognitive impairment, and they're afraid that their parents making bad decisions. Well, nobody wants to lose their autonomy. So instead of just coming in and taking away power from somebody, let's just talk about maybe having some oversight, maybe doing something small to start with. How do we take those baby steps so that everybody's happy? How do we make sure that the person that's maybe losing a little bit of their touch with reality doesn't feel like they're losing control? There's a lot of things that we can do just by communicating and having those conversations with family. If you know that you have one daughter that's going to try and over the top on the other if something happens to you, we need to plan for that so that your other daughter knows where to turn to. And that's really the aftercare. That's probably the biggest thing that I think both of us offer our clients, is somewhere to turn to, somebody that can give them the answers. It's not just the paperwork. It's not just the petitions. It's not just the letters of testamentary. It's really giving them the answers that they need to walk through this process with confidence. Because if you're confident in what you need to do, then somebody can't come in and bully you around or tell you something that you know is not true.
Love, man. I'm sold. I'm not in Georgia, but I'd hire you. That was great. That was great. How can, let's leave it there. How can people, find you, find your firm, get in contact, reach out, all that good stuff?
Yeah, NelsonElderCareLaw.com, or find us on Facebook under Nelson Elder Care Law. Always answer the phone, 678-250-9355. Always glad to help. We focus mainly in Georgia, so your Florida clients, we probably can't help, but always glad to co-counsel with you or anything like that.
Awesome. Josh, thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.